Rose Rosenfield Freeman passed away in her home on February 15, 2001. According to the New York Times, Rose was 107 at the time of her death. Living to be 107 is an impressive feat for anybody, but especially for Rose, who nearly died 2 days before her 18th birthday on March 25, 1911. Rose was an employee at the Triangle Textile Factory in New York City. Rose worked on the ninth floor, assembling garments alongside mostly other women. Below her on the 8th floor was mostly men who took large rolls of fabric and cut them into smaller pieces. That afternoon, a fire broke out on the 8th floor and quickly spread to the ninth floor. As employees tried to flee the building, they encountered a locked stairwell. They quickly ran to the other side of the building, where they encountered large numbers of people trying to exit the structure. It was particularly difficult for the women on the ninth floor, trying to get down to the 8th floor where all of the men were leaving. Rose thought to herself, "What are the executives doing?" They were housed on the 10th floor of the building. She ascended the stairs, went up to the 10th floor, and saw that the executives were taking a freight elevator to the roof. Rose followed, where she saw that firefighters had climbed an adjacent building and stretched out a ladder. The executives were climbing across the ladder to safety. Rose followed, descended the building onto the street, where she painfully watched 146 of her co-workers perish, many of them jumping to their deaths from the windows. That day, Rose learned the importance of a workplace that's safe, fair, and just. Rose would spend the remainder of her years lobbying and advocating for labor laws that make our workplaces safer. She was also a huge supporter of labor groups, or unions, that did the same. This spring, the Supreme Court is hearing a case. It is Janus versus the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. This case will have huge impacts on the workplaces that we know today, as it will essentially make the entire country a right-to-work country. Currently, 27 states have right-to-work laws, including Idaho. Many of these laws were passed in the 40s, 50s, and early 60s. They coincided along with the Civil Rights Movement. Even Dr. Martin Luther King became involved in the right-to-work movement. He was in opposition. He was known for saying, "Wherever these laws have been passed, wages are lower, job opportunities are fewer, and there are no civil rights. We do not intend to let them do this to us. We demand for this to be stopped. Our weapon is our vote." I've been a member of a labor group or a union for the past 15 years. 6 of those years as the president. I've spent countless hours in classes, lectures, and doing my own research on this topic. I've debated, counseled, and coached the pros and cons with my coworkers over the years, which I believe leads me to intelligently speak to it. When we look for employment, a major deciding factor that all of us will face is how much that job is going to pay us. Right to work directly affects all of us in how much we are going to make in our employment. States that have passed right-to-work laws, on average, have an hourly rate that's 16% lower than states with no right-to-work laws. If you work in a state that has right-to-work laws, almost 30% of that population is going to be considered a low-wage earner position, compared to only 18% in states with no right-to-work laws. And 12 of the 15 states with the largest pay gaps between male and female employees are right-to-work states. Wages aren't the only thing that right-to-work affects. Right-to-work also takes away the ability to have good and fair representation in the workplace, to advocate for safety laws. It also takes away the ability for employees to go in and discuss their benefits, their health care, and their retirement alike. It also takes away having a structured disciplinary process and a recourse when you feel like you've been disciplined without cause. In 1947, President Taft passed what is known as the Taft-Hartley Act. This act changed the way that unions could be structured. The term open shop and closed shop that was known before those years was changed. And what the Taft-Hartley Act did was made it so any person that was working in a represented job had to be represented by that labor organization, whether they chose to join the group or not. What the employee was required to do was pay their fair share. That fair share being what it cost the labor organization to go in and negotiate for their wages, benefits, and conditions of employment. What right to work does is takes away the requirement that the employee pays their fair share. This makes it extremely difficult for the labor groups to be able to continue to represent those employees as they have in the past. And that is why we are seeing a diminish in the hourly wages, in the benefits, and the safety conditions in states that have passed right to work laws. So how did so much misleading information get out into the public about right to work? Well, right to work initially began in 1943 in Florida. The phrase itself was carefully selected. Right to work gave the voter the idea that they were somehow giving workers rights, when in reality, as Americans, we all have the right to work wherever we wish to work. Wherever we can seek and find employment, we have the right to work. Right to work does not change that, and the term itself is misleading to the voter. What we need to do is educate voters on what right to work is and what it is not. It is not a right for people to work. We all have that regardless of the laws. Everyone gets the right to work. Unions give workers the benefits of better wages, better benefits, and better working conditions. We need to educate the voters on what unions do. We also need to show the negative effects of right to work. As I previously discussed, the lower wages and the unsafe working conditions. If you work in a right to work state, your job is 2.4 more times less likely to be represented than if you are in a non-right to work state. Many proponents of right to work will argue that workplaces are safer with right to work laws. The main argument is that the workforce is less focused on problems that occur within a labor organization, or focused on the labor or the workings of the labor organization itself. This is not true, as one of the primary functions of unions is to promote safety, and they do that by spending millions of dollars on training their workforce and advocating that the employer also train the workforce in their own skills and craft. Ronald Zullo, a professor at the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor, did a comprehensive research on the workplace and safety when unions or labor organizations were involved. He says workplaces in America are safer than they've ever been. This is not a coincidence, but rather a result of decades of organized labor lobbying for changes in industry and workplaces. We run the risk of right to work taking away all of those decades of work. The rate of industrial fatalities is 40% higher in right to work states, and the rate of fatalities is also 34% higher. So now that you have an understanding of what right to work is and what right to work is not, I want you to quickly visualize, or at least think about, when you take a job, would you rather work in a state where your wages are 16% higher, you're 40% less likely to be in an accident, and you have a represented voice that you can go in and discuss your benefits, your wages, and your working conditions with your employer? Or you can choose to work in a state with diminishing wages and diminishing working conditions and diminishing retirement benefits. In conclusion, I've shown you how right to work affects all employees, not just those that are represented, by lower wages, unsafe working conditions, and lastly, the impact it has on the workforce overall. I encourage you to take action, and the next time that a repeal for right to work comes up, educate yourself and make the appropriate vote for a safer workplace for everyone.